Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today's video is going to be a review of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. Now this was the first book for my very own book club, Tay's Book Club. Thank you to everyone that got involved. I was like shocked that people wanted to be involved in it, so thank you so much. So I'm going to give you the plot of the book, then going to give you my thoughts and feelings, and then we're going to get to your thoughts and feelings because I asked for comments and you didn't hold back, let me just say, with your opinions on this book. So first up, let's do a little bit of the plot. So this came out in 1898. This is a horror novella. This is very much, it's inspired a lot of films, inspired a lot of different things. When it begins, it is Christmas Eve and there is a group of people telling ghost stories, and this is in a lot of Victorian like horror stories. Christmas Eve, everyone will huddle together like a family and tell the most gruesome stories. I don't know why, because we don't do that in England anymore. It's not traditional that like held on, but anyway, they're all telling ghost stories, and then this man says, I have a story that I want to tell you, but I don't have the story with me at the moment. So there was once this governess, she was 20 years old and she went to look after these two children, and she wrote down her full account of her ghost story and what happened to her. So I'm gonna get the ghost story and then I'll like tell you about it. So all the guests are kind of trying to guess like what is the ghost story, what happened with her, and they can't quite guess it. And then we go into the ghost story. So this manuscript that he has that was written by the governess. So keep that in mind, that it's all told from the governess's point of view. So you have a 20-year-old governess, she's very idealistic about the world, and she goes into this isolated house to look after these two children. When she arrives, there's a lot of foreshadowing, there's a lot of like, I was so young and naive, I thought everything would be fine, but you'll soon see it wasn't. Like there's a lot of stuff like that where you're like, oh okay girl. So she arrives and there's little girl Flora who's lovely, and then she gets Miles who's the little boy, and he has been expelled from school, and she looks at him and he's gorgeous, and there's a lot of talk about Flora and Miles are beautiful children, really stunning. So how can they be bad? How can they do any wrong? So she's been warned about Miles, that like he's been expelled from school, he's a bad kid, something's going on with him, but she completely like dismisses that because she's like, he's so beautiful. And that's very much of the Victorian era, that like if someone's beautiful they can't be bad. And when you read Victorian books, the villain is always like the most ugliest description you can ever have of a person, that's the villain. So when you're reading a story and you're introduced to a character like that, you know that person's bad. It's very like black and white like that. So she's saying the children are great, everything's fine. She then starts seeing bloody ghosts. Don't. And she talks to the housekeeper about it, and that's all I'm going to say. Like I don't want to spoil you too much on it. So she talks to the housekeeper, and the housekeeper says that the people that she's seeing used to live in the house. So she's like, oh, it sounds like you're describing this person, but the housekeeper doesn't see the ghosts. And so our main character, she's 20 years old, she's living in this massive house, completely in the middle of nowhere, isolated. She has no one really to converse with, apart from this like housekeeper who she's not really friends with. And then she's got these children who it seems like she doesn't have a lot of experience with children. I personally, right, think that you can take this book two ways. You can take it that it's a ghost story, that this 20-year-old girl got haunted and then the ghosts were haunting the children and wanted the children, and it's all like this gruesome horror ghost story. Or I kind of felt like she was going mad. Like when I started the book, I thought ghost story, and then as it got along, she thought the children could see the ghosts as well, and she started fixating on this, and I thought, is this about madness? I'm not sure. I think the book is, you can take it either way, so it's up to you whatever way you read it. And I reread it, and on the reread I kind of thought that she was losing her mind and she was unravelling herself, because like I said, she's isolated and she's got this kind of thing of like, why was this boy expelled? I can't understand. So she's got this inner conflict. That's my opinion, is I think it's about like madness, maybe. I'm still not sure, and I feel like that's the point of the book, is that you can take it either way and still be quite unsure. If you want a book and you want it to have a resolution and everything's going to be tied up at the end, it's really not that kind of book. It's left up to your interpretation. So this book has inspired so many films, plays, operas. I'm going to put up on the screen now some films, the most famous films that are either adaptations of Turn of the Screw or they are based on Turn of the Screw. The directors of the films have said Turn of the Screw inspired me to make this film, and you will see loads of big films. This is only a handful though of the films. When I was researching for this video, I didn't realise how many films have been inspired by Turn of the Screw, and so I think it is an important book to read because it's inspired so much in our kind of like pop culture world and in the horror world. I personally enjoyed the writing. I've already read Henry James. I read Henry James' Beast in the Jungle, so I knew what I was getting into. He's very slow, he's very descriptive. But I felt like at times she was fixating on things and there wasn't a lot happening. So she was being like, I'm being haunted. Are the children being haunted? Can the maid secretly see them? I'm being haunted. And it just kept going around in circles and there wasn't that much haunting. It was really the thought of haunting, which led to my conclusion that it was more about her psyche and her going mad. But now my friends, we are going to get into your opinions on this book. So to sum up my opinions, I thought that it was an interesting book to read. I'm glad I read it, but I wouldn't exactly say that I found it like that enjoyable in the read. But I think there's something about Henry James' writing that I absolutely adore. And after I read his book Beast in the Jungle, I had to read something else from him. I just had to. There's something very beautiful in his writing. So I'm going to put up on the screen now your pictures of your versions of Turn of the Screw that you sent to me. So there's some different like versions of the books and people were reading it in different languages, which I thought was really cool for the book club as well. Now I'm going to get into your comments, your thoughts and feelings, and I'm going to read them out and like discuss them. So I have my laptop down here that I'm going to be reading your comments from. I asked for your comments. Comments were left on my Facebook page, on Instagram and on YouTube. So first up we have Ines V says, classics disappoint me. Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde, Jane Eyre and now The Turn of the Screw. Let me just say I really like Jekyll and Hyde. I haven't read the other classics. Archaic English is a bit hard to understand for a non-native and the story wasn't scary to me at all. Could have been more dynamic and chilling, but it was more just like long dialogues. 100% agree with you there. A lot of long dialogues, and like I said, it was a lot of her worrying with other people, but not a lot of action really going on within it. I also annoyed by Victorian era obsession with beautiful children who can do no wrong because they're beautiful. I understand the high mortality of children in those times, but still. Anyway, just as with any other classic, I'm not impressed. However, I'm glad I read a well-known work of fiction which has obviously influenced some later works I liked. I feel like that's a really fair comment, to be honest with you. I wouldn't wipe off all like classics and stuff like that. The Great Expectations by Charles Dickens is one of my favourite classics, so I'd definitely say give that a read. Love that. But going back to your point of Victorian era obsession with beautiful children, 100%, but it's just beautiful people as well. Like, it's not just children. In Victorian books there is this kind of thing of they can do no wrong because they're beautiful, and I feel like that hang on has kind of kept in our English society. Like when you see someone like a very good looking man and then someone tells you something that he's done, some people almost don't believe it because they're like, oh, but he's so good looking. And I often feel that when there's a crime that's committed, I watch a lot of true crime, you know, when a crime has been committed and they're like looking at the most obvious people, they always kind of stick to more of like the weirder, odder looking people, when normally it's someone very close to you who's done it. Next up we have a comment from Andrea Wolf. For me, the creepiest element actually was how she adored little Miles. That's the little boy in the story. It was my first book from a Victorian era, and I think that might have increased this effect. Also, often I thought, oh well, us women really overthink stuff sometimes. Overall, I enjoy the experience, but I admit it was easier to push through knowing that it was rather short. The sass! Henry James is like, what? It was short, so we could read it. Yeah, I do agree with the whole little Miles, because she'd been warned, he'd been bloody expelled. And she looked at him and was like, there must be some mistake because he's so gorgeous. No, he's been expelled. So I totally get that with you. And the whole thing of like us women really overthink, I think that plays into my theory, Andrea, that she went mad. That it was a madness within her mind. It wasn't actually a ghost story. I love the comment, and also I love the sass of like, it was easier to push through because it was rather short. Next is the dyslexic reader. Just finished, ... I'm not sure what to think. The writing at no point grasped me, and I found it hard to follow. At the same time, I appreciated the writing style and what it was trying to do. I liked the distrust I built for the narrator. Yes! Oh my god, 100%. Although I'm not sure that was 100% planned. I didn't really care for the story much, so quite enjoyed about the open ending. I was, though, at most points confused. I would say a 2.5, oh, 2.5 stars! And I wouldn't rush to any more Henry James. I actually do get what you mean, and I'm a fan of Henry James' writing, but in this, it did kind of slog itself a little bit. And so I do get what you mean there. And also this distrust built for the narrator. Again, I think she lost her mind. I'm playing into my theory, all these comments. I think that it was 2.5 stars. Harsh in my opinion, but I'm not sure what I'd give it. Like maybe I agree with you actually. Next is from Collab You Lassie, and it's, the book was like spooky detective story. I left unsatisfied, something was missing. Kids were creepy, but ghosts were not scary enough. After all, I enjoyed reading it. Yeah, there was a feeling of unsatisfied for me personally as well, because I don't like open-ending books, so there's nothing the book could have really done differently because it was an open-ended book. But open-ended books, I feel like I put so much time into reading you. And I don't know where it's gone, but I read it twice. I read it, and then I audiobooked it. Can we just talk for 1 second? Don't audiobook it. Like, the audiobook is so slow, and it's such a quick book that it's so much quicker just to read it. To audiobook it is just... oh, don't. I couldn't. Like, I audiobooked like half of the book and was like, no. I'd already read it twice, so I had the story and everything. But yeah, it was like a spooky detective story because she was trying to find out who are the ghosts and the identity of the ghosts. And I actually enjoyed that bit. I enjoyed the conversations between her and the housekeeper as to who are the ghosts and then finding more out about those characters. But I feel like that could be explored a little bit more throughout the book. But no, I totally like get what you mean. And also you did say, after all, I did enjoy reading it. And I feel the same way. Next up, I have a comment from someone I talk to all the time on Instagram, and this is Graham Silla 86. And his comment was, since it's been a few weeks after I finished the book, and having had some time to rethink my original feelings about it, I think it was beautifully written. Gothic Victorian literature at its height. There was a feeling of foreboding and dread throughout the narrative. I enjoyed it mostly. Would I reread? Possibly, maybe not. I love that at the end. Possibly, maybe. That's like the same with me though. Like I'm glad I read it. I think it had some like great elements within it. Oh, Hannah, would you reread it? Definitely not. Like, help me out with the reread. Like, I wouldn't reread it, but yeah, I do agree with you, Graham. Next comment is a short one. It's from IIA_W. For a short book, Henry James... Sorry, let me read it again. For a short book, Henry James sure uses a lot of words. Yes! Oh my god, I literally howled out loud when I originally read that comment because I was like, oh my god, yes. And I was on the reread of the book and I was just like, it's so short and there's like so little that happens within it, yet he's like so descriptive of every single thing about the book, and I just needed like a little bit more action, I think, to make it more palatable. But yeah, no, I love the sass in that comment. There's like so much sass in all your comments. Next comment is from Lydia S. Loved it. It was absolutely terrifying. The kids are so creepy and the appearances of the ghosts were so well written and so gothic. Ah, it was amazing. Lydia, I think you and Graham are the only two that liked it. Like, out of everyone else, you two loved it. I'm glad you loved it. Like a lot of us didn't. This was such a bad choice for my first book club read. I thought we were gonna love this. I thought we were all gonna read this and be like, oh my god, it's amazing, I'd reread it, it's my new favourite classic. And no one has said it's their new favourite classic, so yeah. Next we have Stacey's Stories. I listened to the Turn of the Screw audio last month and didn't like it at all. Just straight back into people being like, hate that book. The governess was so over the top hysterical. She drove me nuts. Yeah, I do think that was the whole thing of like losing her mind and the madness within it, but it did get a bit much. Like I said, she was questioning everyone and then continually questioning herself, and it just went on a little bit longer than maybe it needed to for us to get the story of it. Next up we have Megan Griffiths. Well, at last I finished this book. Sorry if that's not meant sass, Megan, but it like sounds it. Okay. I found it quite a slog, to be honest. Felt the author was very flowery and convoluted in his writing, and that the book could have been much shorter. I quite liked Henry James' writing, personally, for me. I think if you gave the plot to Susan Hill, she would have done a much better job. I'm glad, however, that I read it, as I keep meaning to read some more classic novels. Oh my god, I love that comment. I love how you're literally like, just give it to another author, Henry. Like, give up, Henry. Susan Hill wrote The Woman in Black, which I absolutely love her story. And in the beginning, I feel like she's taken from Turn of the Screw though, because they're like telling ghost stories, and then this man's like, I have a ghost story, but I can't tell anyone apart from you, the reader. And so I feel like she did take from Turn of the Screw, but her ghost story was like so much better. Like The Woman in Black is such a good story. It's something that I would reread. It's something that I love. So I 100% got what you meant about Susan Hill. I loved that though. I think if you gave the plot to Susan Hill, she would have done a much better job. I loved the sass of that. And that is the comments. That is your reviews, thoughts, feelings on this book. So I hope you enjoyed being part of like Tay's book club, Tay book club. I hope you enjoyed us reading it together. I was a little bit like late bringing up my discussion and review, but I loved your comments so much, like the sass. I loved it. I loved it. If you would like to be a part of my next book club, we'll be reading, drum roll, that's a drum roll, Mary Poppins! I'm writing out a whole schedule for that, and I'm going to do a video that will be announcing when we start it, and then on my Facebook page, which I'll link down below, check out my Facebook page, I'll be writing like how much we should have read by this time, like a full schedule, because Mary Poppins film is coming out on December 19th, I believe, and it's Mary Poppins Returns, which is the second book in the book series. So we are going to read the first book together. I've already read it, love it. We're going to reread that together, and then we're going to read Mary Poppins Returns, and I'm going to write out a schedule so we can kind of like get through it together. So that video will be up soon, announcing everything to do with that. Thank you so much to everyone who's involved in this book club. I hope you'll be a part of the Mary Poppins one, and if you weren't involved in this book club but you think it'll be like a fun thing, then join us, come to us. It's not a cult, I promise. And that is it. I will leave you now. This is the end of the video, and I'll see you again soon.